Hello and welcome to the instructional video for the EZPC. Make sure not to remove any of the parts from their protective packaging until instructed, or you may hurt them and cause your kit not to work. This kit is an attempt to make PC building available to everyone, and not just people with tech degrees. So strap in, grab the screwdriver from your kit, and let's dive into the wonderful world of PC building. The EZPC kit contains one computer case, 6 computer parts and protective packaging, and 3 tools you will need. All of the parts are labeled in orange with abbreviations or shorthand on their packaging. The 3 tools you'll need are an ESD wrist strap, a spudger, and a screwdriver. This is an ESD wrist strap. You use it to ground yourself to the case to prevent static electricity from passing to you to any of the computer components. You can tighten the strap by using this. This is the screwdriver we will be using throughout the build. It will fit all the screws that we will need. You can also take the tip off to get the screws in a little bit more tight than maybe you would if you were just using your hand. You put it in the end of it like so, and it allows a little bit extra torque. This is our spudger. We will not be using the screwdriver tip, so it is too small, but the plastic end, the spudger end, is perfect for getting those components into place gently. The first piece of the PC puzzle is the case. A PC case is like the frame of a house. All of the parts that follow this one will go inside the case. This case has 5 ports on the front of it. From left to right, you have a blue USB 3.0 port, a black USB 2.0 port, a headphone connector, a microphone connector, and one more USB 2.0 connection. The power button is located next to the rightmost USB port. Underneath the ports is labeled according to what the port is. The blue USB 3.0 port is around 10 times faster than the black USB 2.0 ports. You can plug USB 2.0 devices into the blue USB 3.0 port, but the speed will no longer be 10 times as fast. Only certain devices and cables can actually use the faster speeds. This information will most likely be on the device's packaging. Now we can actually start building this machine. Place the case sideways on a hard flat surface with the vent side facing upward and the smooth side down. Take out the thicker screwdriver from the kit and use it to take the 2 black screws off of the back part of the case. We only need to take this side off right now because the other side is to hide cables and make the inside of the case more tidy. Gently pull the side off towards the back of the case while keeping it as flat as possible. Before we move on to the motherboard, we need to put on the funny looking bracelet. This bracelet is called an ESD wrist strap. Make sure it is snugly fitted to your wrist so the metal on the inside is touching your wrist at all times. Now take the clamp attached to it and clamp it to the metal edge of the case. I recommend the bottom right just so it will be out of the way. This wrist strap will help to prevent you from statically shocking the different parts. Even the tiniest amount of shock can cause the parts to break, so this is really important. After you are connected to the case with the strap, touch a metal part of the case to get rid of any possible static. Now we can open the motherboard packaging. Try to only touch the edges of the motherboard away from the fragile circuiting. We will now gently set it aside and take out the metal plate and 4 screws included with the motherboard. Now remember, only grab the edges Try not to touch anything that looks metal or important. The metal plate is called an I/O panel. I/O stands for input, output. These different ports are how the computer gets information and sends it out. We need to put this plate on the inside of the back of the case. It needs to face a certain way or else it will not fit. Make sure you are pressing the round edges into the case with the 2 larger circle holes closest to the top of the computer and the 3 smaller circle holes closest to the bottom. Be sure the panel is in there nice and good, or we won't be able to get the motherboard in. The inside of the case has 6 metal posts called spacers. These keep the motherboard off the metal of the case to help with cooling and to help it line up with the I/O panel that we put in earlier. Now we place the motherboard on top of these spacers while lining up the I/O ports with the I/O panel. The only ports that should stick out past the metal of the panel are the 3 circular ones at the bottom and the black D-shaped connector that has a silver column on each side of it. The purple and green ports are PS2 ports. The purple one is for a keyboard and the green one is for a mouse. Not many mice or keyboards use these connections anymore. Most use USB. The port to the right of the purple PS2 port is an HDMI port. This port is used for displaying. The part to the right of that is the VGA port. This is another display port. The HDMI port can send out audio and video, but the VGA can only send audio out. You can only use one of these ports on the motherboard. This means you can only use one screen. If you wanted to use a second screen, you will need to use one of the ports in the graphics card we will install later. The ports next to the VGA one are our old friends, the USB ports. The blue one on top is a USB 3.0, and the one below it is another 3.0. The 2 directly to the right are also USB, but they are 2.0. The port above those is an Ethernet port. This one is how you connect to the internet. Although this one looks similar in size to the USB ports, Ethernet ports take a special cable called an RJ45 cable. Their ports are 3.5mm ports. 3.5mm ports, or jacks, are almost always used for audio or sound. The blue is for sound input. This means you can plug some devices into it and record the sounds from that device. The green is sound output. This is where you would plug in speakers or headphones to hear sounds your EZPC is making. You may remember that the front of the case had a headphone jack and a microphone jack too. You can choose to use one of each type, but using 2 of the same type will cause only one to work. For instance, you can plug a pair of headphones into either the front or the back connection, but you can't play sound through a set of speakers plugged into the back while also listening to the sound through your headphones plugged into the front. Once you have all the ports lined up with the panel, we can screw the motherboard into the case. There are 6 screws included with the motherboard. Make sure the spacers are lined up and screw the screws in until the motherboard will not wiggle around when you push the sides. Don't make the screws too tight, just enough for the bottom of the screw heads to touch the motherboard. The case has 7 sets of wires with connectors on their ends. These cables need to be plugged in so you can use the USB ports, sound jacks, the case fan, and the power button on the front of the case. The first one we will plug in is the one that says HD Audio on the side and has a yellow sticker on the other side. Notice how the tip of the connector has a solid space instead of a hole on the side that says HD Audio. We need to line this up with the pins in the very bottom left where another yellow sticker is. Make sure the yellow sticker on the connector is facing the one on the motherboard. The 3-pin connection to the right of the yellow stickered connection is where we will plug in the case fan. There is some white lettering underneath that says SYS, and then a white line, and after the line it says Fan 1. The case fan's cable is the smaller all-black wire with 2 connectors on the end of the wire. Ignore the bigger one for now. Plug the smaller connector into the SYS fan pins and make sure the rectangle on the connection spot goes in between the 2 raised edges on the connector cable. Moving along the bottom of the motherboard to the right of the sys fan 1, now you will see a 9-pin connection that says J_COM1 underneath it. Skip this connection and continue right until you see panel 1. The panel 1 connectors are the different colored cables paired up with a white one. There are 4 sets of them. The first ones we will plug in are the orange and white connectors. The words on the connectors need to be facing out. These wires are how the on-off button works. Plug this connector in so the orange wire is on the off side of the on-off section of panel 1 and the white is on. Under those pins, plug the blue and white reset cables in. The white cable needs to be on the right side, same side as the orange cable above it. Next, grab the red and the white cables that say HDD LED on them. The white wire on this pair needs to be closest to the blue wire of the last pair. The red wire should be on the side with the white plus printed on the motherboard. Grab the green and white wires next. The white one says power LED minus sign. Plug it in next to the white cable from the orange-white on-off cable. The green cable goes in next to that where the plus sign is. The connection to the right of panel 1 is J front USB 3.1. The thick dark blue cable plugs into this one. It needs to be plugged in with the little rectangle side of the connector facing the bottom of the case. The last 2 gray cables are connected together at their ends. To the right of the blue USB 3 cable are 2 9-pin connections. Plug the last connector into the top one with the white USB letters facing down. Now that we have the motherboard in and the case wires connected to it, most of the hard part is done. The EZPC is starting to come together. Now let's install its brain. The processor, or CPU, are what I am referring to. Now you can go ahead and grab the ESD protective packaging labeled CPU plus fan. Gently open it, and inside you will find the CPU fan, which goes on top of the CPU. It's pictured here, and also the CPU. Be careful when removing the CPU from the packaging to not touch the bottom side with all of the metal pins. These pins are very fragile. Rotate the processor chip until the thick gray metal side is facing up towards the sky. Look around the green edges until you find a golden triangle or arrow. This arrow needs to match up with the white arrow on the motherboard. The processor goes into the dark gray square filled with holes. This square is called a socket. Make sure the silver lever on the bottom of the socket is lifted up as far as it will go before putting your processor in. After making sure the lever is fully upright, gently set the processor into the socket so the points of arrows are pointing at each other. Press gently on the green edges with the spudger until the processor is fairly level. The side with the lever will be slightly raised until you lower the lever. Gently press the lever down until it locks into place. Now that the processor is installed, it will work to control the EZPC. The processor is in charge of the math that the computer does and all of the information from the different parts and connections. The motherboard connects all the different parts and the processor tells them what to do. All of the controlling can cause the processor to heat up to really high temperatures. If the processor gets too hot, it will stop working and could possibly melt into the motherboard. To stop this from happening, engineers put heat sinks on the top of processors. Looking at your processor, we can see the silver square. This silver square is our processor's heatsink. The heatsink works by pulling heat off the processor and storing it in the heatsink. This by itself is not enough to keep the processor cool enough. So now we put the fan on top of it to cool it down even further. The big metal piece underneath the fan is another heatsink. Notice on either side of the CPU are two black plastic pieces with two silver screws in each one. We need to place the plastic tabs on each side of the fan to match up with those. Get one side on and firmly press the other side down. Now we grab the cable attached to the fan. There is a red sticker on the connector that needs to face the other red sticker on the connection on the side of the motherboard closest to the top of the case. Once we install the GPU or graphics processing unit, you will be able to use two monitors. The GPU is very similar to the CPU, but it only works with video and image information instead of all types of information. Typically, advanced GPUs are used for high-end gaming or video editing. Open the packaging labeled Graphics Processing Unit. This part is also known as a graphics card. There should be a single screw included with the card. The GPU needs to be installed in the slot above the white words PCI Express 3. There is a little white lever on the slot. The metal plate on the GPU needs to be lined up with the open space in the back of the case. You may have to wiggle the lever to get the GPU all the way in place. It is also important to make sure the bottom of the metal plate on the GPU is between the case and the motherboard, not sticking out of the metal slot. Once the GPU is in all the way, screw the included screw into the case. Line up the hole in the GPU with the case hole to make sure the GPU is more stable. Let's open up the RAM packaging now. Putting the RAM into the EZPC is much simpler than explaining how it works, so let's start with the installation. On the top right of the motherboard there are two black slots with tiny plastic levers on each end. Push the levers down on both ends of one slot. On the stick of RAM that we have, there is a empty space in the golden pins. We need to line this up with the notch in the slot on the motherboard and press down until the levers on either ends click into the holes on the sides of the RAM. RAM is where the programs that are currently running are. A lot of the data is stored in the hard drive, but all of the data needed to use the program is called up by the CPU from your hard drive. Then the program is placed in RAM. RAM also loses all of the data stored on it when it is turned off. The hard drive is where your information can be stored safely even when your computer is off. The inside of a hard drive looks very similar to a CD. It has a spinning disc inside called a platter. There is also a little mechanical arm that can read what information is on the disk and also change the information on the disk. Inside of the hard drive packaging is a SATA cable, 4 screws, and the EZPC's hard drive. The hard drive comes pre-installed with Linux Mint. In the top right corner of the case, there is a yellow H sticker. Directly under this is where we need to align the screw holes in the HDD with the holes in the case. We can only get to 2 on this side of the case, so we have to take the other side of the case off to get to the other screws. Then, take the black SATA cable and plug it into the slot on the hard drive that looks like a small L. Take the other end's connector and connect it to any of the slots that say SATA. Last but not least is the PSU installation. The power supply unit provides power for the whole PC. Inside the PSU packaging should be 4 screws and the power supply unit itself. Place the PSU in the top left of the case with the Logicist label facing towards us and upside down. Push it as level as you can with the back of the case and make sure the bottom right corner is resting on the metal ledge for support. Then we can screw all 4 screws into the back of the case and power supply unit. Find the 4-prong connector with 2 black and 2 yellow wires and plug it into the square 4-hole connection on the top left of the motherboard with the hook latch facing the yellow H sticker. Now we can grab the biggest connector and plug it into the space next to the RAM slot. The HDD, or hard drive disk, still needs power, and the cable for it says SATA, S-A-T-A, and has a green sticker on it. Place it in the only other connection spot on the hard drive disk with the SATA and sticker side facing towards the top of the case. Find the cable with the blue sticker on it and plug it into the larger connector on the case fan that we left earlier. Make sure the motherboard connection does not come undone. Now you can put the side back on and screw it into place. That concludes the EZPC build. Now all you need to do is plug in the power supply to a wall outlet and get a monitor, a mouse, and a keyboard. Hopefully, EZPC has lived up to its name, and maybe I was able to help you learn a little more about computers. Have a nice day. Oh, and take it easy.